How is everybody tonight? All right, amen. Let's just bow our heads for one moment before we begin. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for being with us on your Sabbath. Please be with us now as we open up the second book, which is the book of science, of health, and see what it is that you want to show us. Please be with me now and give me your words in Jesus' name, amen. All right, so tonight, folks, what we're going to look at, is that coming up there? I want to make sure that we've got the screens. We're going to be going over a lot of information tonight. So as you heard, I am a sleep specialist, but I'm really happy to be here at Wildwood, where I know that just like in other places where I've been, can you hear this already? I think the battery might be dead. Let's try a different one. Should we try red? You'll see why I chose red in just a second, or maybe in a few minutes. All right. Is that better? Can you hear me? Okay, good. So as I said, here at Wildwood, I know that you that teach about the 8 laws of health. Do you teach about the 8 laws of health here? Okay, I know those 8 laws of health because I've been to Weimar, and I think they teach the 8 laws of health. Those are nutrition, exercise, water, sunlight, temperance, air, rest, and trust in God. Right. Those are the 8 laws of health. Now, as it turns out, sleep goes under that R, which is rest. And today we're going to talk about rest as well. In addition, though, we're going to talk a little bit more about sunlight. And I'll tell you why sunlight is the stepchild of the 8 laws of health. It's been abused. It hasn't been felt like it's been loved as much as the other 8 children, if you will. And that's because of how we've looked at it in the last few years. But we're going to talk more about sunlight. And I guarantee you that after we get done tonight, my hope is that you are going to look at sunlight as importantly as you look at nutrition. Okay? Do we put a lot of emphasis on nutrition, the N in New Start? Yes, we do. I think that we should be placing as much emphasis on the letter S. And we'll see why that is important, because as we are right now in fall, what's happening to the amount of sunlight that we're getting? It's going away, and it's going to become more and more important. So the title of my talk is Sunlight and Your Health. We're also going to throw in some sleep as well, because these two things are actually very related. Yeah, so it's wonderful to be here. As they said, I'm from, I work at Loma Linda. I teach at the medical school there, work just outside of Loma Linda at Redlands, and it's good to be here. I was about to say in Tennessee, but we're not in Tennessee, are we? We're in Georgia, aren't we? All right, so we've been in 2 states here in the same day. That's kind of unusual when you're living in California, which is so big, but that's great. There's 2 ways that sunlight and light interacts with your body. And you probably know all about the way that light interacts with your eyes and circadian rhythm, and the fact that light is really important to entrain your circadian rhythm, and that you should not be exposed to light at night because it shuts down melatonin production from your pineal gland in your body, and that's not a good thing. So you should be having bright light during the day, and you should be having dark nights at night. That's something that I'm sure all of you know. We're not going to get into much of that. What I'm going to get into, though, is something that I'm sure many of you are not familiar with, and that's how the sun is affecting your human body. How many people have heard this? People are about to go outside into the sun, and they say, I'm going to go outside, and I'm going to get my vitamin D. And people end it right there. They think that the only benefit to sunlight is the vitamin D. And so what some people do is they'll take a vitamin D supplement, which is fine, and they think that they don't need to go outside. Or if they can't go outside, they'll take a vitamin D supplement and everything's going to be okay. You're not going to think that by the time I'm done today. And I'll show you why. We're going to talk about the effect of sunlight on the mitochondria. Folks, everybody wants longevity. Everybody wants to live longer. That's why the whole world right now is enticed with our health message. That's why when we talk about nutrition, exercise, water, the whole world is talking about that. Not only at the high levels of our government, but everywhere across the world. Because what is everybody interested in? Everybody's interested in living longer. Is that the reason why we were given the 8 laws of health? No. Let me tell you something. That is not the reason why we were given the 8 laws of health. But it is a side effect of the 8 laws of health. Living longer, listen to what I'm saying. Living longer is a side effect of the 8 laws of health. What is the true purpose of the 8 laws of health? Do you know, I looked this up. Every single one of those letters that we just talked about has been proven, has been shown, has been studied and demonstrated to improve cognitive function. What do each one of us, what is the most important organ in the body? What is the only organ in the body that you can't transplant? The brain. Whether it's nutrition, whether it's exercise, you just go all the way down the line. All of those improve the noggin. And it's the noggin that's responsible for understanding righteousness by faith. It's the brain that understands and gets you a relationship with Jesus Christ. That doesn't give you 10 more years. How many more years does that give you? Eternity. Do you see the reason why we need to have New Start? Do you see the reason why we need to understand these 8 laws of health? In fact, I have this quote. I'll have to find this quote somewhere along the line. There's a quote from Ellen G. White. She says, there will come a time, and it sends chills down my spine when I see it, because she says this, and I'm paraphrasing, there will come a time where there will be agitation and people will want to understand health reform. And she says the reason why they're doing this is because God is stirring the soil, turning the soil to get ready for the planting of the seed. So this is a sign that God is getting ready. God is not going to plant seeds on bad soil. If God is going to give the message, if God is going to give the loud cry, there has to be ears to hear. And people's brains need to be clear to understand the message. The step to doing that is understanding the health message. And that is the reason why we should fully and all the time give the health message, even though it might not be attached to what we want to have it attached to, even though there's not a hook. Why are we going out and teaching the health message if they're not going to come to church? I'll tell you, if we can get the health message out and people's mind can be clear, it is then fertile soil for the Holy Spirit to be doing the job that it can do to truly convince people for a relationship with Jesus. So, but longevity is the hook. People want to live 10 years longer. That's great. There's nothing wrong with wanting to live 10 years longer. Let's give them the message that will, as a side effect, do that. But if you want to do that, you can't have chronic disease. If you want to have longevity, you cannot have chronic disease. Chronic diseases like heart disease, diabetes, obesity, dementia, inflammation, long COVID, even cancer, all of these are chronic diseases that you cannot have if you want to live longer. All of these diseases have one thing in common: mitochondrial dysfunction. That's a technical term. What is that? The mitochondria is let me hear it, folks, the powerhouse of the cell. That's correct. So this is what gives energy to make the cell work. Think of the mitochondria as like an engine in your car. It makes locomotion. It makes your engine go. It makes the wheels spin. But at the same time, it also gives off heat. And if that heat is not dealt with, it'll overheat the engine. It'll make your engine less efficient. It could even shut down your engine. And so the mitochondria needs fuel. It makes energy. It gives off carbon dioxide. But it also gives off its own type of heat called oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is what damages the mitochondria. And so we have to find a way of reducing oxidative stress, just like we have to make sure that the engine doesn't overheat. We have a cooling system. We have an oil pan. We have a radiator. We have a water pump. All of these things are there that if they were to go bad, what would happen to your engine? It'd shut down. And if your cell's engine shuts down, you don't have a cell. So the thing that we've seen that shows that actually may improve this, the cooling system, if you will, is something called melatonin. Yes, it's made in the brain when you go to sleep, but actually orders of magnitude melatonin are being created, produced exactly where it's needed, which is in the mitochondria. And there's something out there that does not require a supply chain. You don't have to pay money for it. You don't have to wait for it to be shipped in. You don't have to go down to the pharmacy. There is something that can actually dramatically increase the production of melatonin in the mitochondria to reduce oxidative stress. What do you think it is? That's what you guys are good test takers, because that's what we're talking about. This is the sun Actually, this is in my backyard. I live up in Oak Glen, just about 30 minutes outside of Loma Linda, and this is the sun setting on Mount Baldy in Southern California. It's bright red and it's glorious as it's going down there over the mountains of Mount Baldy. This is in the summertime when it's out there. But this is an article that was written just 6 years ago. This is Scott Zimmerman and Russell Ryder, who I now have become acquainted with because of their work. This is what they say in their paper. It has now been shown that the mitochondria produce melatonin in many cells in quantities which are orders of magnitude higher than that produced in the pineal gland. This subcellular melatonin does not necessarily fluctuate with our circadian clock or release into the circulation system, but instead has been proposed to be consumed locally in response to free radical density, that's oxidative stress, within each cell, in particular in response to near-infrared light. That's the type of light that comes from the sun. Do you see that? 95% of your body's melatonin is produced exactly where it's needed, in the mitochondria, to go against oxidative stress, and it's the type of light that we see in the sun, near-infrared light, that is able to actually increase its production and do a number of other things. So what is this infrared light? You cannot see it. It's well beyond the red spectrum, and as a result of that, it has a couple of properties. One of the properties of infrared light is that it can penetrate very deeply. Very deeply. So how many of you have pulled up to a stop sign and someone else pulls up next to you playing that stuff they call music? You know what I'm talking about, right? And what's it doing? That they're listening to it in their vehicle, but only the low frequency sounds can escape their vehicle, go into your vehicle, and shake your steering wheel like you'd like nothing, right? That's low frequency energy that's able to penetrate very deeply. The same thing happens with light. Low frequency energy, infrared, stuff that is such a low frequency that you can't even see it, is able to penetrate very deeply into the human body. This is a study looking at infrared light and clothing. So notice that along the bottom of the x-axis there are the number of layers of clothing, and we have different types of clothing there. We've got polyester, cotton, denim, fleece, acrylic, denim again, and some of it's wet, some of it's dry. What do you notice? The first thing I want you to notice is on that screen there is that in the first 1 or 2 or 3 layers of anything, you're not going to be blocking a lot of that infrared light. It only drops it by about 30 to 40%. You know this intrinsically. If you go outside on a hot summer day, or even now, and you can feel which side of your body the sun is hitting you. The reason why you can do that is because of infrared light. That infrared light from the sun is what feels warm when you have the sunlight on you. And you can feel that even through your clothes. So this type of light from the sun penetrates through clothes. It also penetrates through your skin. As you can see here on this graph, the further you go more toward the red spectrum, the deeper it goes. We actually used to think that it penetrated down 8 centimeters. And that's a lot, that's very deep. 8 centimeters, that's about 3 inches. This is actually a photograph here of Bob Fosbury. He is a professor emeritus at the University College London. He is worked on the Hubble Space Telescope, and he's part of the European Space Agency. I actually know Bob Fosbury very well. I've actually met him online, and we've discussed and talked and emailed back and forth. That is his hand in front of an infrared light source taken by an infrared light camera. What do you notice? There's veins. Are there any bones? No, there's no bones. His hands has bones in them, but the light goes right through the bones. This type of light can penetrate through bone. Okay? When you're outside, this type of light from the sun can penetrate your skull. The cerebral spinal fluid around the brain diffuses it evenly across the surface of the brain. And the sulci and the gyri, that means the little things that look like a walnut on the top of your brain, direct the light down into the deep crevices of the brain so that the gray matter, which is only on the outside of the brain, which has the cell bodies and therefore the mitochondria, can absorb that infrared light. Our brains were designed, he says, so Scott Zimmerman, who wrote the article earlier, he says that when he looks at the technology in the stealth fighter that absorbs the radar and prevents it from being reflected back so it can be detected by ground radar, is the same technology that he sees in the brain. It's basically an infrared light collector. That's how the surface of the brain is designed, even though it's covered with a skull, because infrared light can penetrate that. Now, the picture on the right is also Bob Fosbury, and this was just published this year in Nature Scientific Reports by he and his colleague, Glenn Jeffrey, out of UCL. This is an amazing thing what they did. They took humans outside into the sun, and they were actually able to detect on the other side of their body the sunlight coming through the body in the infrared spectrum. What does that mean? We used to think that when we go outside into the sun, the only benefit was simply the light coming into our eyes for circadian rhythm, and the sun hitting our skin, making vitamin D. Here's the truth. The truth is, now that we know this is what we know, that every single cell in your body reacts when you go outside in the sun. This is that picture there on the right is actually sunlight detected by a very sensitive detector going straight through the body. So what did they do? They measured which wavelength of light best penetrated the human body. It turned out to be 850 nanometers, which is in the infrared spectrum. And he published this paper in July of this year, titled "Longer Wavelengths in Sunlight Pass Through the Human Body and Have a Systemic Impact which Improves Vision." Now, why did he choose vision? Because Glenn Jeffrey is a professor of ophthalmology at University College London. He has all of the equipment in his lab to measure how well somebody can see. And as it turns out, the mitochondria are highly concentrated in the retina of the human eye. In fact, it's the tissue in the human body with the highest concentration of mitochondria. So what he asked this question, you can see here, by the way, that graph on the right-hand side of the blue is the sunlight spectrum going into the human body, and the red is what's coming out the other side. This is the part I want you to understand. When you go out into the sunlight, infrared light is affecting all of the cells in your human body. Think about that, okay? This is why it's so important that if you want to get better, if you have things that are going on inside of you, don't think that sunlight is just hitting the skin. It's actually going clear through you and having effective changes. So this is what they did. They took these subjects and they divided them into three groups. They made a light panel out of LED bulbs in the infrared spectrum at 840 nanometers, and they irradiated three types of subjects. One type of subject stood there without the lights on. You need a control group. One type had the entire body illuminated with 850 nanometers of infrared light, and the last one had it with their head covered with aluminum so that none of the light could get to their eyes. And remember, what are they doing? They're measuring the mitochondria in the eyes, because it takes a lot of mitochondria for the cones in the eyes to be able to see red light, green light, and blue light. That is a very highly metabolic cell that needs a lot of energy. They're jam-packed full of mitochondria. And as we get older, the amount of energy that is put out by these mitochondria, these batteries, starts to fall off 30%, 40%, 50%, 60%. This is the reason why our metabolic rates fall. This is the reason why we have congestive heart failure. This is the reason why we have dementia. This is the reason why we don't see so well as we get older, because our batteries are losing energy. Okay? So what he did is he took these subjects and irradiated them with this red light to see whether or not he can improve the energy output of the mitochondria and allow these cones to improve their ability to see color, because he has very sensitive machines to be able to do that. That green thing there is a cone, and all those little things in the middle there are all jam-packed with mitochondria. Okay, so what did he do? He looked at red light, that first graph with the 3 bars on the right. The first red bar is the control group. The threshold is set at 100. The second one are those people that got irradiated to the head and the body, and you can see here that the threshold dropped by 9%. What does that mean? They could see better. Now, here's the kicker. When they put those people into the same thing except covered their head and then measured how well they could see, there was still a reduction in the thresholds. What does that tell you? It tells you that when the sun hits certain parts of the body and improves the mitochondria in the field of the light, those mitochondria can communicate with other mitochondria outside of the stream of light, something called through the abscopal effect. and improve mitochondrial function even in those parts of the body. The key is that the whole body doesn't need to be illuminated with infrared light to get the benefit. They notice the same thing with blue light. So let's review. To get beneficial effects in the mitochondria, which is important for understanding chronic disease, all you need to do is go outside into the sun and get enough sun exposure in some of your body, even though you're clothed, because it goes through, to get the benefits in the whole body. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, there's another effect of infrared light. Trees and the leaves are highly reflective of infrared light. The leaves, even no matter what color they are, if you were to go outside and take a picture like this is an infrared photograph. Do you see how bright the leaves are? Are you starting to put two and two together? Do you remember when we were given instruction about where our sanitarium should be built? There was definite instruction that it should not be in the cities, that it should be in the country, and it should be surrounded by many trees, and the trees should not be cut down. Okay, I want to show you a video here about, what about cloudy? Dr. Seheult, we know you live in Southern California, where the sun is always shining. What about here in Tennessee or in Georgia, where the clouds come out? I want to show you something. This is me taking a photograph here. Let's see if we can get this to work. Okay. So the sun is behind the clouds, and maybe if you wanted to see what kind of infrared light you still get. Everywhere you see red is infrared. This is an infrared filter. Do you see that? Even on a cloudy day, look how brightly the trees are reflecting red light. This is actually, for those of you who are physics majors, what we're doing here is we're doing something called an anti-Stokes effect, where infrared light is coming into the electron, it's bouncing the electron up in the orbital, and then as it comes back down with a higher energy, so it's shifting infrared light into the red spectrum. So all infrared light through this filter is now looking like red. So everything you see here, or orange, I guess, on this screen, it kind of looks like an orangey red. Now, I'm going to show you what it looks like with the sun out. It's even more impressive, okay? The sun is a little bit out right now. Do you see that? See how much infrared light? Look how much, all of that stuff that's lighting up, that's infrared light. You're walking through a garden with leaves all around you, you're getting a tremendous amount of infrared light. Okay? So let's review. Infrared light from the sun penetrates deeply into the human body, has effective changes at the mitochondria, it increases melatonin production, it reduces oxidative stress, increases ATP production, increases carbon dioxide, because as the metabolism of the mitochondria speeds up, it's causing to produce more carbon dioxide, right? And also, it's reducing glucose, which is its fuel. So there was a study that was done not too long ago, published last year, and what they did was they gave light to these people as they had a bolus of glucose. This is called a glucose tolerance test. And they measured how high the glucose went after they took in a meal of glucose. And you can see there that those that got the red light for just 15 minutes and caused there to be an increase of metabolism, an increase in mitochondrial function, they had a 27% reduction in glucose. So eat when the sun is out. Eat outside if you can. That's going to have an improvement in terms of insulin sensitivity and reducing glucose. What does that also tell you? Are we designed to be eating when the sun is down? That was a quick one. Notice here again on the left-hand side, you can see that those people in red that had red light illuminated on them had almost at every single one of those points a reduction in glucose concentration. If you want to reduce your glucose after eating a meal, make sure you're in some sort of a light. Not a light here in the house. We'll talk about why that's not going to work. It's best to go outside. And then on the second graph, why is red above that? Because we're measuring carbon dioxide. There's more carbon dioxide being produced because the mitochondria is being ramped up. The engine is being revved. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay. So there should be, if this is true, if we're looking at the pathophysiology in an individual, we should see evidence of this epidemiologically. There was a study done by Oxford University and the University of Leiden in the Netherlands. 10,000 people, they measured their blood And then they did something really interesting. They said, let's draw blood and let's look in the previous 7 days to see what the weather report was like and see how much sunlight was out. And what they found, that by every hour that there was more sun in these people that had their blood drawn, that was actually predictive of increased insulin sensitivity and a reduction in triglycerides. Just the weather report. Imagine if these people actually made an effort to go outside. Another study, this was done in Sweden in 2016. They looked at 30,000 Swedish women, and they asked them these questions. Are you somebody who likes to go outside? Are you somebody who likes to avoid the sun? Or are you someone that gets just moderate sun exposure? 3 groups, that was it. And they followed them for 20 years, and they saw which ones of them died. And then they tried to figure out what was it that caused, that if there was anything that sorted in terms of dying. Notice what they found. That in the highest sun exposure group, they had the least amount of cardiovascular disease death, they had the least amount of cancer disease death, and they had the least other causes of death as well. And the magnitude of that was such that those women who actively went out and sought out the sun and smoked had the same rates of death as those women that avoided the sun and did not smoke. Am I convincing you here that the S in New Start is just as important as the T for temperance? Or maybe the N for nutrition? Folks, we're like a machine. We're like a car. You can put great fuel into the car all day. You can put 91 octane in the car all day. But if you're not rotating the tires, if you're not changing the oil, if you're not switching out the air filter, how long is that car going to go? Is there more to life than just good nutrition? Absolutely. It's a package deal. This is another study that was done a few years later. This is just this published, 400,000 in this one. It was published in 2024. 12 and a half years follow-up. They found exactly the same thing, except this was in the United Kingdom, and it was not just women, but men and women. They have solariums there where they go out into a portion of their house that's covered by glass, and they noticed those people that had solariums and went outside into the solariums, people that went outside in general, in all of these cases, you can see there that vertical line going from the top to the bottom, all of those data points are to the left, and it showed that for those people that used solariums and went outside, all-cause mortality, cardiovascular disease mortality, cancer mortality, non-cancer, non-cardiovascular disease mortality was all less for those people that actually went outside and was in the solarium. But you're asking the right question now, aren't you? What about, not sleep, what's the big worry if you go outside into the sun? Exactly. So the guy who actually published this study, Dr. Richard Weller, is a dermatologist, a professor of dermatology at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. Do you think they worry about melanoma up there? Absolutely. They have very fair skin up there in Scotland. And so he looked at this, and this is what he found. He found that there was a numerically slight increase in the incidence of melanoma, but it was not statistically significant. That's 400,000 people, not statistically significant. However, when he looked at mortality from melanoma, there wasn't even a trend to increase mortality in melanoma. So this is this balance that we have. Going outside, reduction in all-cause mortality, cardiovascular mortality, which is the #1 killer in the United States. But on the other side, what happens to skin cancers? No statistical significant increase in the incidence of melanoma and absolutely no increase whatsoever in the death rate from melanoma. It's right there. This is what he said. He published this, and he said, analyzing data from the UK Biobank, we have shown that increased sunlight exposure, estimated from both geographical and behavioral information, correlates with significant reduced all-cause cardiovascular and cancer mortality in white-skinned UK population. Although there was a 10 to increase incidence in melanoma with increased sun exposure, there was no rise in mortality. Our UK corroborates similar studies in Sweden, as I just showed you, showing that for Northern European populations, insufficient sun exposure is probably a significant health problem, and physical activity outside with non-burning sun exposure will improve public health. This is from a dermatologist. Okay? This is another mind-blowing study. We'll talk about this in a little bit as well. This is a study where they gave a watch to 80,000 people that could measure light. And at every specific hour of the day, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they could tell which subjects had bright light coming into their watch and those with not bright light coming into their watch. And they asked this question decades later. They said, let's see who died, and then figure out when those people that died had bright light exposure and those that didn't have bright light exposure. Does that make sense? So they want to see what happened. So this is 88,000 people. They wore a light sensor for 1 week. They validated 3,000 for 4 repeat measurements, and they followed them for 8 years. This is the data that they got. Now let me show you what this data is, because this is mind-blowing granular data. The first line at the bottom there is 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The next line is 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it goes all the way across until, again, so you get to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And this is the question, this is the graph that they're showing you. The graph represents those people that had greater than 90% of the light coming into their watch versus those people that had less than 50% of the light coming into their watch. And the question is this: did they die? So check this out. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, those people that had greater than 95% of the light coming into their watch versus those that didn't had a 0.78% chance of dying compared to those people. In other words, light at 4 o'clock in the afternoon is a benefit. Bright light, like light outside. And that happens, but as you can see there, it goes till about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and that's when the effect starts to wear off, after about 9 o'clock, and then about 12 o'clock, now light ceases to be a benefit for you, and it's now a liability. Bright light now kills you after 12 o'clock. And it stays that way until about 6 o'clock in the morning. And then it flips around the other way, and now light is no longer your enemy, it now is your friend at around 7, 8 o'clock, and all the way through for the rest of the day. Do you see that? Folks, we're not talking about diabetes here. We're not talking about cardiovascular disease. We're not talking about feeling well or feeling well rested. We're talking about either being 6 foot under or walking on the surface of the earth. We're talking about death. This is how much light affects your body. We can actually measure it in mortality. Okay? Brighter nights, darker days. This is the problem that we have in society. Let me unwrap this for you. We get up, this is something that we today, this is unique to us. For the first time in human history, in the last 50 years, we get up in the morning, we have a refrigerator, we have a cupboard, we make breakfast, we can eat. We don't have to go outside for that. That's only been a recent thing in human history. We go to our garage. We get into our car with tinted windows. We drive on the freeway to our parking structure. We get out of our parking structure and go up the elevator to our office, which has a window in it that is specially coated to prevent the infrared light from coming in, because it costs more money to cool down the building. We work there in front of a computer. And we spend all day until 5 or 6, and if we're really good, 7 or 8, because we want to get the job done, and maybe we take our work home with us, and we go home after the sun's gone down, into our driveway, into our garage, and we open the door, we go into our house where the lights are on. And we do this day after day after day after day. And then we have chronic disease. And we wonder, why do we have chronic disease? I ate a vegetarian diet. Why do I have colon cancer? You can put premium fuel in the car, but if you don't rotate the tires, if you don't change the oil, the car is not going to run. Do you understand what we've been doing? The very thing that has caused us to be this way, our wealth, our ability to do well and to have money and to have a house and to have a car and to have a good job that we climbed the ladder up, that we got educated for, is killing us. The plan was never to be a desk worker. The plan was always to have balance, to be a mine worker, but also to be effective out into the fields, to have manual labor to balance our minds. You understand what I'm saying? This has been the blueprint from the very beginning. And this is the problem. This is coming to us not from the spirit of prophecy. This is coming from secular science. And what are they saying the problem is? The problem is brighter nights and darker days. They predict higher mortality. A prospective analysis. Listen to what they say. These findings demonstrate the importance of maintaining a dark environment across the late night and early morning hours when the circadian pacemaker is most sensitive to light, and seeking bright light during the day to enhance circadian rhythms. Protection of lighting environments may be especially important at those at risk for both circadian disruption and mortality, such as the intensive care or age settings. Folks, nursing homes. You're lucky if those people make it down for dinner, let alone outside. Here is a great missionary possibility. You've got people at the end of their lives, their probation is coming very soon, and they're literally sitting there. If you were to have a missionary voluntary group on Sabbath, simply to go up to those people, get them in wheelchairs, and get them outside into the sun once a week, they're a captive audience. They can't go anywhere. You've got 15 minutes with them. And they're thankful to get out into the sun. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, this is low-hanging fruit here that I'm talking about. You go to, knock on the nursing home. Hi, we're here. We'd like to get Mr. Smith into a wheelchair and outside. Who's going to argue with that? You got them in the chair. You wheel them outside. Give them a glow track. Talk to them about, they would love to tell you about their life. They're at the point in their life that they want to review their life with somebody. And if you were to review their life with them, I'm sure you could come to some hook that you could tell them about the love of Jesus Christ. And you'd be getting them sunlight. And it costs nothing. Like, we're trying to pay advertising to just go to the nurse. These are the people that are waiting for God. They're there. I'll tell you, when COVID hit, these were the people that were the first in the ICU. They have been deprived of light for months. And they're getting vitamin D capsules. Do vitamin D capsules penetrate through the body? They don't do any of this. Vitamin D is a marker of sunlight. It's okay to take the supplement if you want to, but you're not getting anywhere near the benefits of sunlight if you're taking a vitamin D capsule. Across the general population, avoiding night light and seeking daylight, listen to this, may lead to a reduction in disease burden, especially cardiometabolic diseases, and may increase longevity. This is not the spirit of prophecy. This is science telling us what we've already known. We've known for years that people who live in green spaces, people who live amongst the trees, people who have grass, people who are not inside the city, they have a 28% reduction in diabetes, a 16% reduction in cardiovascular mortality, a 31% reduction in mortality. All-cause mortality. The critics said, the reason why that happens is because people who live in green spaces have money. That's the reason why they're doing better. It has nothing to do with the trees. It's because they're able to exercise. They have means to do all of these things. This is what the critics were saying. I think that it's actually the trees themselves that are doing the benefit. And I think I was proved correct with this project. Have you ever heard of the Green Heart Project? This is an amazing study that they did. They just published it this year. This is what they did. South Louisville, Kentucky. 4 square miles, urban sprawl, not a tree anywhere. This is what they did. They measured 745 people's HSCRP. What is HSCRP? It's a surrogate marker for inflammation in the body. If you have a high HSCRP, you're more likely to have a stroke or a heart attack. So they measured everybody's HSCRP that was living in this 4 square mile area up to about 745 people. And then they did the absolute unthinkable. They grabbed a shovel and they dug 8,000 holes. And they planted 8,000 trees with full leaves and everything on them in this 4 square mile area. Can you imagine? That's 2,000 trees per square mile. And then about 2 to 3 years later, they went around and they measured everybody's HSCRP levels again. It dropped by 13 to 20% on average. That correlated with a 10 to 15% reduction in stroke and heart attack. They did not do any exercise program. They did not give out people money so they could be upwardly mobile. This was just literally planting a tree outside of their home, so that when they went outside, perhaps they were getting some more infrared light. What does the Spirit of Prophecy say? They say nature is God's physician. The pure air, the glad sunshine, the beautiful flowers and trees, the orchards and the vineyards, the outdoor exercise amongst these surroundings are health-giving elixir of life. Outdoor life is the only medicine that many invalids need. Its influence is powerful to heal sickness caused by a fashionable life. A life that weakens and destroys the physical, mental, and spiritual powers. She said that back then 100 years ago. How much truer is that today? How grateful to weary invalids accustomed to city life. The glare of many lights and the noise of the streets are the quiet and freedom of the country. How eagerly do they turn to the scenes of nature? How glad would they be for the advantages of a sanitarium in the country, where they could sit in the open air and rejoice in the sunshine and breathe the fragrance of tree and flower. There are life-giving properties in the balsam of the pine, in the fragrance of the cedar and the fir, and there are other trees that are health-promoting. Let no such trees be ruthlessly cut down. Cherish them where they are abundant, and plant more where there are but few. This is exactly what they did in South Louisville, Kentucky. And what happened? They reduced stroke, they reduced heart attack just by doing that. So this is Richard Weller. All of this evidence has now actually started to weigh on the recommendations that these societies are giving. You know what the recommendation was in the past, right? The sun is a deadly laser. Stay out of the sun. Slip, slap, and slop. That's what they said, right? Listen to what a dermatologist says, and was published in August of 2024. Dermatologists and skin researchers have made great progress in understanding some aspects of the interaction between UV and our skin, but we need to stand back and take a more holistic view of UV exposure in human health. The United Nations Environmental Effects Assessment Panel and an Australian panel endorsed by the Cancer Council of Australia and Australasian College of Dermatologists have both just produced position statements recognizing that, listen now, sunlight has beneficial effects. That should be considered in formulating policy on sunlight exposure and highlighting the necessity of carrying out further research into these beneficial effects. We should take note. This is the dermatologist saying that. I took note. Let me tell you, during the pandemic, it was a wake-up call for me. We had supply chain issues, and I quickly realized that if we ran out of oxygen, if we ran out of medications, if we ran out of electricity, we could do nothing. Okay? So I started to have some thoughts about this. And there were two things that bothered me about what I saw during COVID. There's many more than just two things. But there were two things that led me to my belief that I have today regarding COVID. The first one was biochemical. Here is the mitochondria that we just talked about. And we've all heard about ACE2. How many of you know about ACE2? ACE2 is the receptor in the cell for the spike protein from the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Okay? Do you know what ACE2 does? Do you think that ACE2 is just a receptor that was put there to be the receptor for the virus? No. ACE2 is actually an enzyme that mitigates oxidative stress. ACE2 is part of the engine of the cell that cools the engine down. So when the virus comes in and knocks out ACE2, what happens to the temperature of the engine? It goes up. So think about this. Think about each one of us in this room has a temperature to the engine in the mitochondria of our cells. Some of us are young, have no chronic disease, doing well, we exercise, we get good sleep, and that engine's running nice and cool. Some of us have a little bit of extra weight on, we're a little bit older, we're not keeping up with our health, and our engine is going along, but it's running a little bit hot. And all of us are driving down the road, and what we see coming up in the distance is a big hill called COVID-19. And we're all going to go up that hill because you can try and not be infected by COVID, but eventually it's going to come and get you. Some of us are at the front of the line, some of us are at the back of the line, but we're all going to be going up that hill. There's no exit. What's going to happen when some of us go up that hill? Exactly. We're going to overheat. And that's the reason why some of us got into the hospital. And folks, the people that we saw getting admitted to the hospital are exactly the same people that I talked about at the beginning of the talk. It was the people with heart disease. It was the people with diabetes. It was the people with obesity, dementia, inflammation, cancer. These are all of the people who have poor functioning mitochondria. Here's some proof. This is a study that was done looking at oxidative damage in the cell. What do you notice there on the bottom? We've got the people who are 20 to 40 years of age, and the blue shows what they had normally and what they had with COVID in red. The 40-year-olds to 60-year-olds, they had less oxidative damage in blue, and when they got COVID, their oxidative damage went up. Look at the people there that are greater than 60 years of age. Before COVID, they had already that much damage at that age. What did COVID do to them? This is the reason why people who are older with health problems did not do so well with COVID-19. So, in other words, what I'm trying to tell you here is that part of the mechanism for how to avoid problems with COVID is to have what? Is to have no oxidative stress, is to reduce oxidative stress, correct? Absolutely. And what do we say that sunlight does? Sunlight produces what? Melatonin in the mitochondria. Melatonin is the biggest antioxidant known to man. And you don't have to go and buy it in the store. You don't have to go to the GNC to buy it. All you have to do is to do what? And I'm not saying that this is going to protect you 100%. Is anything 100%? Is sunlight all of the 8 laws of health, or is it just one of the 8 laws of health? So don't say that this is all you have to do. Right? When we operate in the operating room, do we say, oh, the doctor washed his hands today and put on sterile gloves? We don't need to sterilize the equipment. Heavens no, right? Do we say, oh, we've made sure that the temperature is correct in here and the humidity is just right. We don't need to have a scrub nurse in the room. Do we say that? Or do we say we don't want any infections in this operating room? The physician is going to wash his hands. He's going to put on sterile gloves. We're going to have sterile equipment. We're going to make sure we sterilize the skin for the incision. And we're going to make sure we use sterile equipment when the patient comes out of the operating room. Do we do all of those things? Absolutely. Okay? Don't say that we don't need to do this, because don't be a person who says or. Be a person who says and. Okay? Let's be smart people. Because if we want to reduce things, we need to do all of the above, not just one of the things. We're not going to have good health if we just focus on nutrition, but ignore all of the other letters, correct? God gave us 8 laws of health. There's not just one commandment, there's 10. We have to be smart people. So you can see here, the other thing that bothered me about COVID-19 was this idea of vitamin D. It seems as though people who came in with good vitamin D levels did well. But people who had very poor vitamin D levels did not do well. So obviously, a correlation does not equal causation, right? We can't say that low vitamin D levels was the cause, but we can say that those people that didn't do well also had low vitamin D levels. So what did we do as physicians? We had nothing else to do. What do we give them? We gave them vitamin D. Did it help? Not very well. I didn't see any miracles. I didn't see people getting off the table after we gave them the vitamin D tablets. Now, sure enough, it takes time for vitamin D to work. It has to be metabolized. The liver has to metabolize it. The kidney has to metabolize it. But I'm telling you, I didn't see an improvement when we gave people vitamin D. Here's what my thinking. Here's how it's changed. I believe that vitamin D is a marker for those people that have been out in the sun. Because when you go out in the sun, what do you get? Vitamin D. That's just one aspect of the benefits of sunlight. So what does this all tell me? It told me that people were getting a benefit from sunlight. So I looked to the literature to see if this was true. This was a study that was done in Europe. Do you remember when COVID hit Europe? What was the country that was hit the hardest? It was Italy, northern Italy. There was a big connection between the fashion world in Milan, which is in northern Italy, and China. So Italy was hit hard. That was between February and July of 2020. But when the sun started to go down in the autumn, like around right now, they actually did a study to see which countries had their surges first. And they asked this question: was it temperature that caused the surges? Look at that box on the far left. It was a flat line, no correlation with temperature. Temperature did not predict it. Second box, humidity. Was it humidity? Again, a straight line. Then they asked this question: was it latitude? Now, latitude is how far away you are from the equator. And what did they find? The very first country to get the spike was Finland. As the sun was coming down from the northern hemisphere into the southern hemisphere, and that shadow was cast into Europe, the first country to hit that shadow was Finland. And as it did, it went down and marched down the continent to the very last country that had its surge, which was Greece, right at the bottom in the south. There was a perfect correlation. Latitude predicted the surge of COVID-19, and we know that latitude has to do with what? Sunlight. Another study at University of Edinburgh looked at the United States, where nobody could get enough vitamin D in the south, or they were getting plenty of vitamin D in the south, but not in the north. They asked this question: did sunlight and its surrogate UVA predict mortality? The answer was yes. As more and more people got sunlight, mortality levels dropped. They said, this is amazing. Let's see if it works in England. Same relationship held. More sunlight equaled less mortality from COVID-19. They went to Italy and they asked the same question. Exactly the same thing happens. I actually got to work with Margaret Scutch. She is a geographist in Mexico. We put together a paper where it showed that around the entire world, people in countries that had more than 50% of the population of being overweight, we could match their latitude with their COVID-19 mortality that they published. However, this slide is the most amazing slide, and I want you to digest this slide. You may not be able to see it very well, but what we have here is the cause of death for heart disease, cancer, COVID-19, stroke, chronic lower respiratory disease, Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, influenza, and kidney disease. All of these causes of death in the United States marched out on every single day of the year for multiple years. Can you look at that graph? What do you see? What's the first thing that pops out? There's a periodicity to it. It does the same thing every single year. It jumps up high and it comes back low. And at the same time of year, it jumps up high and comes both infectious and non-infectious diseases. And what you'll notice is that all of them come up together and all of them go down together. The other thing you'll notice is that they all peak 1 to 3 weeks after the shortest day of the year, and they all are at their minimum 1 to 3 weeks after the longest day of the year. In fact, if you look at influenza, the peaks that we have in influenza, the number of deaths that we have in influenza every single year, is lower than the increase in cardiac deaths that we see at the same time every year. We have more increase in cardiac deaths in the flu season than we have flu deaths in the flu season. We have a higher increase in cardiac deaths during the flu season than we have flu deaths in the flu season. Total. Do you understand what I'm saying? So people would say, oh, the reason why we have all of these flu deaths in November and December and January is because of Halloween and Thanksgiving and Christmas time. We all get together, the family gets together, they spread the germs around, and that's the reason why. It has nothing to do with sunlight. This is Australia. When did they celebrate Christmas in Australia? The same time. But that's in their summer. So here we can really see it. If there's a huge influenza peak at Christmas time in Australia, then it's Christmas time. But where do we see influenza happening in Australia? It's in the winter time. And when's their winter time? It's in June and July. Look at that graph. Those spikes are right in the middle of the year. This has to do with sunlight. When you're not getting enough sunlight, you're more at risk to getting all of these diseases. Again, this is the United States. Notice that the spikes are at the end of the year. This is Australia. Notice that the spikes are in the middle of the year. Christmas time is the same both places. The whole world celebrates Christmas all at the same time. Do you guys understand what I'm saying here, right? All right, the next question is going to be, well, what about those countries that are at the equator, where there really never is a lack of sunlight? Well, what happens? This is Singapore. It's literally 80 miles from the equator. There is no pattern because they never lack enough sunlight to actually have a pattern. So this is a study that was published at Harvard Kennedy School. This is Harvard Kennedy School. And they looked at this bifurcation of influenza in the wintertime in 2009 when we actually had the pandemic of H1N1 that started in July. This is one of the few times that we had a huge increase in the flu in a season that was not winter. And they were able to look at this, and this is the conclusion that the Harvard Kennedy School came up with when they researched this. They said, quote, "We find that sunlight strongly protects against getting influenza." Harvard. So we have studies from Oxford, we have studies from Harvard, we have studies from University College London, we have these published in places like the Proceeds of the National Academy of Sciences, we have it in Nature Scientific Reports. This is not like some backwoods scientific stuff that we're talking about. This is major reporting, and we're having organizations like the Australasian Cancer Council and the Cancer and the WHO that are saying, we are seeing benefits to sunlight. And we need to rethink what we've been saying before. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is not fringe science. This is science that's happening right now, but it's not getting down to you because your physicians, your healthcare providers are not clued into this. We've already told you that infrared light can penetrate deeply into the human body. This is what happens in these graphs. This is exactly the same type of inflammation that we see in COVID. This is something called the toll-like receptor 4. This is what causes COVID inflammation. When they did this in a Petri dish, the inflammation is represented by the blue bar. All of the other bars to the right of that is what happens when you introduce infrared light. It drops off. It drops off. All right, so I've shown you epidemiological studies, pathophysiological studies. All we need really, and what I needed to see, was a randomized placebo-controlled trial. You get patients with COVID, and you put half of them doing the regular standard of care, and you get the others out into the sun, or something equivalent to that. Put infrared lights on them. And they did that study. Okay? This is a Brazilian study, 30 inpatients admitted to the hospital for COVID-19, 50 to 80 years of age, diagnosis of COVID-19. They randomized them to just 15 minutes a day of infrared light. They put this jacket on them that they actually made. This is the actual jacket right here. You can see the inside of it are just these LED bulbs that you see at the end of your remote control when you're sitting in front of the TV, getting your daily night dose of light that you shouldn't be getting. At 940 nanometers, but this is infrared light, and they randomized them to somebody switching it on and somebody switching it off. That's the only difference between these two. In fact, this type of light, you can't even see it because it's blind. It's a blinded study because it's in the infrared spectrum. Perfect study. What happened? 15 minutes, once a day for 7 days. That's all it was. And this wasn't a very particularly bright light either. All right, so notice what happened. Notice, first of all, that every single one of these categories that I'm going to tell you about was statistically significant. It was statistically significant in every single category. We're not p-hacking here. We're not trying to find a difference and then amplify it. Every single difference was statistically significant. Notice what happened. In the people that got the infrared light, oxygen saturation improved 9.4% versus 2.6%. Tidal volume, the amount of air they could breathe in at the end of 7 days, was 74 milliliters versus 22 milliliters. The inspiratory pressure that they could breathe in was 24.9 centimeters of water versus 7 centimeters of water. They were stronger. The MEP, how strongly they could breathe out that air, was 19.1 versus 2.0. Okay? The respiratory rate, when you're coming in, your respiratory rate is very high. And as you get better, that respiratory rate starts to come down. It dropped by 5 points in the intervention group and only 2.8 in the control group. The heart rate, when you're coming in, is very high. And as you get better, that heart rate comes down. It dropped by 20 points in the intervention group, only 2 points in the control group over those 7 days. Lymphocytes, these are the white blood cells that are responsible for getting rid of the virus. And we would see this when I took care of patients. One of the things that we could tell whether they're getting better is whether that lymphocyte count was starting to come up or whether it was going down. Those in the intervention group, their lymphocyte count went up by 850 counts, whereas in the control group, it dropped by a further 10 points. But here, I left the best one for last, okay? People who got no treatment stayed in the hospital for an average of 12 days. Those that got the intervention were discharged a full 4 days faster. Discharged from the hospital. Folks, if you don't understand how in this country we pay for medical care, if you're a hospital, if you're an Adventist-owned hospital, if you're an Adventist-managed hospital, it doesn't even matter. If you're any hospital in this country, this is how it gets managed. When a patient is admitted to your hospital, you submit the billing to the insurance company based on the diagnosis that they have, and you get paid for that diagnosis. It's called a DRG, okay? A diagnosis-related group. Now, it's up to you to figure out how that patient is treated. The faster you can get rid of that patient, the better you can get that patient. Let's put it that way. The better you can treat that patient, the more effectively you can treat that patient, the faster you can treat that patient and get that patient out of your hospital, you get to collect that. It costs thousands of dollars a day to hospitalize a patient. If you could get that patient out 4 days faster, you can do the math. When you have 20 to 30 patients with COVID coming into your hospital every day, and you're getting each one of them 4 days out, it's almost fraud. Like you would have an advantage in the market like no other hospital. Do you understand what I'm saying? You are getting paid to take care of that patient for 12 days. You're only needing 8 days to do the job. And all you would have to do is get that patient into the sun for just 15 minutes a day. Do you understand what I'm saying? When I saw this, I was convinced. I had a patient that was asked, I'm the critical care physician, and so I was asked to evaluate a patient on the floor who was positive for COVID. He had come in 2 days earlier on just 4 liters of oxygen and continued to progressively get worse. By the time I saw him, he was on 100% oxygen, 35 liters, high flow oxygen going into his nose. He was potentially ready to be intubated. And I went down into his room. It was an isolation room. I wish I could have taken a picture of that room, because when I went into the room after I put a mask on to go in to talk to him with my students, here was a man that was sitting in the bed, depressed, with his daughter next to him. The blind was closed. It was a dark room, and the first words out of his mouth to me were, "How long do I have to live?" And knowing what I've just told you right now, I was just like, I cannot believe this. I cannot walk away from this room knowing what I know to leave this man to die in this room, because I know exactly what this man needs. But it's risky to take somebody outside who's on that much oxygen. I immediately talked to my respiratory therapist and my charge nurse, and we got our heads together. And by this point, I was telling everybody, so they knew exactly where I was going with this. But they got everything together. We got 2 tanks together to put on him a non-rebreather and an oxygen tank. We got him into it. He was not happy to do this, by the way. It's not like, yes, come and save me. This is another whole aspect that we could spend an hour on. When you see somebody that needs something, but they don't understand what it is that they need. But he later told me that my excitement about this apparently got him up to do it. So he got into the wheelchair, and we actually got him outside. I got his permission to take this photograph. This is him from behind. To the far left is his daughter. The next lady there standing under that green umbrella in the background is our respiratory therapist, Kim. Peter is the charge nurse. He's there sitting on the right-hand wall, and there's my patient sitting in the October sun in sunny Southern California, allowing that sun to come through and hit him. He told me later, he said, "You know, Doc, that first day that you got me outside, that sunlight felt so good." Within 5 days, he was discharged home without any oxygen. I've never seen somebody get better so fast. This is what happened. Day 1, he went from 35 liters, 100% FiO2 down to a 15-liter oxidizer. The next day down to a 10-liter oxidizer. The next day, 6 liters of oxygen, 4 liters of oxygen, discharged home. I'm convinced this is what we need to do. Okay? I've never seen somebody improve so fast. And this particular anecdote, I want to be very clear. This is not proof that this works. I've already given you the proof. I showed you the randomized control trials. That's the proof that you need. This shows you how quickly it works. This is Florence Nightingale. Florence Nightingale was a nurse. She was actually the mother of modern nursing. She was the founder of modern nursing. She was named Florence because she was born in Florence, Italy, and she was born at a time that the UK was at war in the Crimean War. Her parents were very well-to-do, and they did not want her to go into the ill-repute career of nursing, which is what it was at the time, unfortunately. The reason why we consider nursing today such a high calling is because of this lady. She completely cleaned it up. She went around and made sure that everything was clean, that people got fresh air, sunlight. She was known as the lady with the lamp. And I'll tell you, decades before Ellen G. White was given the health message, this is what Florence Nightingale said. She said, "Of all the remedies I have used or seen in use, I can find but one thing that I call remedial for the whole disease, and that is a profuse supply of fresh air. Second, only to fresh air, however, I should be inclined to rank light in importance for the sick. Direct sunlight, not only daylight, is necessary for a speedy recovery." And she would know. She didn't have all the scientific accoutrements of today. She didn't have an echocardiogram, an ultrasound, a lab, but she was there at the patient's bedside, and the difference was dramatic enough that even she, with her own eyes, without all these scientific instruments, could tell that people who were outside in the sun, people who got fresh air, they got better faster. It's very powerful. I love this quote, though. This is 1871. Ellen G. White. "The feeble one should press out into the sunshine as earnestly and naturally as do the shaded plants and vines. The pale and sickly grain blade that has struggled up out of the cold of early spring puts out the natural and healthy deep green after enjoying for a few days the life-giving rays of the sun. Go out into the light and warmth of the glorious sun, you pale and sickly ones, and give and share with vegetation its life-giving, health-dealing power." Remember what we showed you about the watch and about staying up at night and what it does to your health? Because we know all that information about melatonin and light in the eye. Well, we've learned that in the last few decades. But Ellen White said this in 1888, before we had any of that knowledge. She said, "Make it a habit not to sit up after 9 o'clock. Every light should be extinguished. This turning night into a day is a wretched, health-destroying habit." So this is what we did. 100 years ago, this is how our hospitals looked. We knew that this worked. People got out. We built hospitals with the understanding that everybody needed fresh air and sunlight. This is what we did. It's because it worked. And it still works. Here's a study. This was just published this year. Using near-infrared radiation in both MICU and SICU patients. Okay, they used daily photobiomodulation therapy, a light blanket. This was in 880 nanometers. It was sham-blinded, triple-blinded, safety, all of this. They had goggles, all that sort of stuff. This is what happened. Do you see what was the result? It cut ICU length of stay by 30%. This is not a particular diagnosis now we're talking about. This is not like just COVID. This is anybody who gets into an intensive care unit, whether it's surgically or medically. You give them infrared light, they get out of the ICU 30% faster. Do you know how much it costs to hospitalize someone in the intensive care unit? Thousands and thousands of dollars. You're getting capitated fees and you're paying extra money. If our hospital administrators listen to this type of advice, they might be able, Adventist hospitals who are more inclined to understand this advice, might be able to weather the financial storm that is coming to hospitals in the next decade. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's almost like the death angel is coming And those who paint the doorposts with the blood of Christ are going to be able to understand and to get in. And those Egyptians that don't maybe understand but understand something is coming may knock on our doors before that night to ask to come in so that they can be saved. Do you understand? Is that a repeat of what happened in the past? We have these studies. You're in a room, your bed is closer to the window, you get out faster. Researchers have found that patients' hospital room might affect their outcomes after surgery. For example, having a window in the room that was associated with faster recovery after surgery. So I went out, and I've talked about this, I've gotten onto podcasts, and one day I got a call from a young mother with a 15-year-old boy. And she sent me these medical records. What I'm about to show you is a true story that I have actually verified by looking at the medical records of this boy. This is a 15-year-old boy that was diagnosed with a terrible cancer called acute lymphoblastic lymphoma in September of 2023. Started chemotherapy, and in May, a number of months later, had to stop the chemotherapy because he came down with an upper respiratory illness. Was admitted on June 1st of 2024. He had a runny nose, a cough, and they started him on antibiotics. His chest x-ray showed some infiltrates, particularly on the right, but also on the left, in the lingula. And about 2 weeks later, he had a bronchoscopy, which showed something very concerning. It showed that he had mucor in his lung. Mucor is a flesh-eating fungus. And so they put him on the highest doses that they could of the most powerful antifungal medications, posaconazole and amphotericin B. Folks, in medicine, we call amphotericin B amphoterrible B because of its side effects. You actually have a lifetime dose that you cannot go above, and it can actually affect the kidneys very poorly. But that's what he did. So he was on that in the middle of June. Now, another bronchoscopy that was done later showed a fungus ball, which means that there was an area of the lung that was not getting perfused. You know that's a problem, because if we're giving antibiotics into the bloodstream, that means the antibiotics can only go where the blood's going. And if there's an area that's walled off that blood can't get to, that means our treatment can't get to that area. And so they decided that the patient may need to have surgery. So he had surgery on July 1st, a full month after being admitted to the hospital. And the surgery was, unfortunately, to remove his entire left lung. That was the only way that he could survive this infection. 15 years old. They moved, this is, by the way, this is in Minnesota. It's at a very highly ranked tertiary care hospital with an adult side and a children's side. He was moved from the children's side to the adult side so that he can have cardiothoracic surgery to remove the entire left lung of this boy. He came back, and about a week later, he started to have increasing white blood cell counts on the right-hand side. Antibiotics were brought in. They found new nodules on the CT scan. A thoracentesis was performed. Cultures were sent. And unfortunately, what they found was that now the infection had spread to the remaining lung on the right side. He had ongoing fevers. This is despite having high doses of posaconazole and amphotericin B. Halfway through July, now we're 6 weeks into this hospital admission, worsening oxygenation, work of breathing. Now he gets put on a non-invasive ventilator called BiPAP because his lungs cannot breathe. This boy is fully awake, fully alert, knowing and understanding exactly what's going on. Another CT scan was performed at this time, and this is what it showed. And I want to step you through exactly what you're seeing here on the slide. These are 3 pictures of his lungs on a CT scan, one taken in the upper portion of his lung, one taken in the mid portion through his lung, and another one taken through the lower portion of his lung. And what you're seeing there on the right side of the screen is his left lung, which is removed. That's why it's completely white on the right side of the screen. Okay, everything's flipped on a CT scan. On the left side of the screen, you're seeing the remaining native right lung on the left side of the screen. And the first slide is up the top. You can see it's almost completely whited out. That's because it's fully involved with infection and there's no air spaces left. The middle slide is very similar looking, as you can see. It's filled with infection, it's white, and there's really no black air spaces that he's breathing through. Finally, the bottom slide, you can see how there's some black there on the left side of that picture. That's the air space that's left. That's what he's breathing through. He's breathing through a fraction of one of his lungs. And as a result of that, he's on a BiPAP machine, and this is what's keeping him alive. So they have a multidisciplinary care conference. Obviously, they cannot take out the remaining lung. He needs to have a lung to live. They say he's not a candidate for heart-lung bypass. They have nothing further to offer him. They could do a bronchoscopy, but they don't think it's going to be beneficial. There's a little bit of a pleural effusion there on the right side, but they don't believe that that's going to be beneficial. They make him do not resuscitate. And with focus on continuing IV therapies and not escalating care, the parents don't know how to deal with this. In fact, as the mother is telling me this, she's choking up. She can't even complete the sentence because she can remember exactly how this conversation was. How do you communicate this to a 15-year-old boy on a ventilator who understands exactly what's going on? And so we asked the question, how much time do I have to live? The very same question that this man asked me in the hospital. They asked them, and the doctors give him 2 days to live. Okay? So that's where we are. And they approach him and they say, what is it that you want to do in these last 2 days? Because there's nothing more that we can offer you. And he says to them, I just want to go outside. And you know, if you're a healthcare worker and you are trying your darndest to get to someone better and you can't do anything, and they have a request, you're going to move heaven and earth to fulfill their last request, correct? And that's what they did. They searched the hospital for any sources of oxygen that they could do to put together so they could get this guy mobile in a hospital bed outside the hospital, just outside into where the fresh air and the sunlight was. And that's what they did. Now, they were also doing something else along the side. They had this device called a Firefly device that would give off ultraviolet and infrared light, and they had been doing that on and off during this admission, but they decided to do it a little bit more consistently at this point because they had nothing else left to offer them. Okay? So, let me show you what happened. On 7/17, that was the first day outside, he went outside from 2 o'clock in the afternoon to 6 o'clock in the afternoon. At that point, he had a fever. He had a white blood cell count of 27.5, which is elevated, and he had neutrophils of 22.6. He's an active infection going on. That's all consistent with that. And that's what they did. The next day, they took him back outside again on 7/18. He was outside from 2:30 in the afternoon to 7 p.m. They used the Firefly for about 5 minutes, 3 times a day. Fever disappeared. White blood cell count dropped from 27.5 to 18. Neutrophils dropped from 22.6 down to 13.7. Folks, the only thing that changed was that he went outside. The antibiotics were the same. The antimicrobials were the same. None of that had changed. Day 3, he should be dead by now. Day 3, Firefly again, TID. Fever's gone. White blood cell count is normal, 7.9. Neutrophils, 4.8. Day 4, fever's gone. All of the other things he actually started to get better instead of getting worse. Instead of dying, he got better. The amount of oxygen that he was being required to have went down. They were able to take him off the BiPAP mask. Okay? And they went inside and they said, wow, we can't explain this, but we sure like to get a CT scan to see what's going on. Why is he getting better? Let's get a CT scan. So I want you to, again, remember, this is what the CT scan looked like beforehand. And then after about 6 days of sunlight, they did the CT scan, they met in the room, all of them in the room, and they pulled up the CT scan, and the mom said to me, she said there was a gasp when they pulled up the CT scan. And in fact, they could even hear some of the residents kind of swearing under their breath. They couldn't believe it. This is what they saw. These are the actual CT scans. 5 days, just 6. This boy had been in the hospital for 6 weeks. And after 5 or 6 days of nothing else changing, just simply getting him outside, this is what they saw. That was mid-July. That's October, after he goes home and comes back. Not a sign of disease anywhere. This is in 2024. Today, he's home completing chemotherapy for his ALL. He's alive. He just completed his Make-A-Wish. That's amazing. This is what's happened to us, folks, over the last 200 years. We've gone from natural sunlight outdoors. This is when Ellen White was telling us about the fact that we needed to get outside. Look at that last graph, because that's where we are in terms of the amount of natural light that we're getting. This is a major issue that we've been missing out. We have not been changing the oil on our car. This is what we have in terms of LED lights. You can see this orange spectrum. That's what the sun does. That orange light at the top is what the sun does. The blue light, that blue, I should not say blue light, but that blue line represents the spectrum that we get from incandescent bulbs. The red light, you see there, that red graph, I should say, that's what you get from LED. LED bulbs cut out all of the infrared light that a normal light would have, and that's why it's more energy efficient. And because it's more energy efficient, our government has, not just our government, world governments have mandated that to reduce energy consumption, we need to have lights that only give off in the visible spectrum so that we're not wasting energy on infrared light. Do you understand what I'm saying? So our lighting environments have changed. This is a study that was done by Glenn Jeffrey once again in an LED lighting environment. He simply added an incandescent light bulb. This is what their office looks like on the campus of UCL. And this is most likely what the hospital environment was like for this young boy in Minnesota. 6 weeks in a room like that. Okay? Notice the windows on this are all highly reflective. That means there's no infrared light going in. This is what it looks like. This is the photograph of what it looks like in their office there at UCL. By the way, this is a photograph of what this room would look like. This is a photograph of what your house looks like. This is a photograph of what your bedroom looks like. There is no light in your bedroom. You can see visible light, but in terms of infrared light, this is what it looks like. It's completely black, it's completely dark, unless you open the door. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is why I'm telling you need to get outside. So let's look and see what happens. So that first slide there in the upper right-hand corner is what their environment looks like. The second one is an infrared photograph of that environment. There's no infrared light. The third one is where they put incandescent light bulbs at random in the office at different desks. And then the fourth picture is now what it looks like with infrared. Do you see the difference? By adding incandescent light bulbs back into the environment, now in your environment that you're working for 8 hours a day, you have incandescent light bulbs and infrared light back. What did they notice when they did that? What they noticed was, I don't know if you can see this at the bottom, but they noticed that there was an improvement in the vision, again, and what they saw because there was mitochondrial improvement because of the infrared light that was coming into the eyes. Do you see what I'm saying? Here's another study where they did the very same thing, except what they found was there was an improvement only in the wintertime. Now, why would that be? Because in the summertime, people are going outside when the sun is still up after work. And in the wintertime, is the sun up after work? They're not. That's why they would benefit in the wintertime to having incandescent light bulbs. Are you guys understanding what I'm talking about? Incandescent light bulbs have something that LED bulbs don't have. They have infrared lights. Infrared light ultimately comes from where? The sun. Can you get infrared light in a building? It's very, very difficult. The only way you can get that life-saving infrared light is to go outside. There's new rules coming for LED bulbs, by the way. So I want to show you this picture. This is a picture at my house. Outside of my house, if I were to show you this picture without a filter, you would see green trees everywhere, because I live amongst all of these nice green trees. I want you to notice that I took this photograph in my living room that was lit from all of this light coming through a bunch of windows. Yet, because my windows block infrared light, what does the inside of my room look like? It's dark. I could be in a room that's brightly lit, but I'm getting no infrared light whatsoever. What do you notice about the light coming through one of those window panes that's closed? Do you see much light coming through that? The one on the left? Now, when I open the window, how much light do you see coming in? That red light is infrared light. You have to go, what? When you get up in the morning and the lights are on and you remember Dr. Seheult saying, oh, we need bright light in the morning. Here I am inside getting bright light. No. What do you need to do? Go. Thank you. This is what's happening to the amount of light that we're being exposed to over the last 20 years. It's been dropping. And then what happened was COVID came, and we learned all of these behaviors. How many people now have DoorDash? You don't have to go out and get food anymore. You can stay in your home and get DoorDash while you're playing video games on your computer. You don't have to go out to that meeting anymore because now they're giving you an option to do Zoom. Do you see all these behaviors that we learned? So we're not going outside our home anymore because going outside of our home is complicated, it's expensive, we don't want to do it, we just want to stay inside. But what about in the wintertime? It's cold outside. We just want to stay inside. Folks, we now live in a situation where our cars have climate control. We have thermostats. Do you think there's a benefit from having extreme cold and extreme hot in our lives? I can tell you that for sure that is the case, because we have something called heat shock proteins in our body that are released when we are exposed to intermittent hot. Does that sound familiar? How many in here used to do hot fomentations? Do you remember that? That's exactly what we're talking about. But we're afraid of that. We want everything to be climate controlled. We don't want hot, we don't want cold, we want Goldilocks, everything just right. And so this right here, the sunlight, is low-hanging fruit. Folks, let me tell you, I gave a talk on Stephen Bartlett's A Diary of a CEO. We're wrapping up here. And I went through all of these things about New Start: nutrition, exercise, water, all of these things. And there was this statement, and I have to tell you what the statement was. At the very end of New Start is the last T. What's the last T stand for? I think it was divine that those letters were arranged in that order, because I went through every single one of those letters, citing all of the data that I've just told you, and it was very scientific. And the last one was talking about trust in God. There's actually good science that shows that people who have trust in God actually have lower anxiety, lower depression. The science is just as effective. But when you start talking to people who are not inclined to know about God, and you start talking about the science of God, what do? Folks, there's some people, though, I have to be very specific about this. There are some people that have grown up in an environment where God was used as an abuse. And when they hear that you believe in God, they think that you believe in the God that they have grown up with. So when they ask you, do you believe in God? Here's the first question that I ask them. What do you mean by God? What is the God that you believe in? What are his attributes? Because if you're asking me to believe in the God that you're with, I might be with you. I don't believe in that God either. But when we get to that, listen to what this comment was. This is on the YouTube comment. Quote, if I had, by the way, on this talk, I spent the whole hour and 50 minutes talking about NEWSTAR, and I spent the last 10 minutes talking about the last T. This is what he said. If I had heard those last 5 minutes without the preceding 2 hours, I would have written off the speaker as a complete crackpot. But he is so serious, praise God, and studious as a physician and educator and communicator that by the end of this interview, I heard the last 5 minutes with a totally open mind, because he had earned that. What a fascinating interview. Folks, this right here is the health message. This is it. And this is what Ellen White says. And I have a special affinity for this message because this is called the Loma Linda messages, and that's where I'm from. But this can be applied to anywhere in the world. This is what she said. I have a decided message for our people in Southern California. For months, I have carried on my soul the burden of the medical missionary work in Southern California. Recently, much light has been given me in regard to the manner in which God desires us to conduct sanitarium work. We are to encourage the patients to spend much of their time out of doors. So this is where we are. We've talked about sleep. We've talked about sunlight. We've talked about chronic disease. The rest of the world wants our message because they want to live 10 years longer. But we know that the true value of our message is not to live another 10 years. It's to live with eternity. So if you see chronic disease, if you look around your room, if you look around your home and you see chronic disease, I want you to look it straight in the eyes and I want you to tell it, let's take this fight outside. Thank you very much. Let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the second book that you have given us. We have not believed you when you told us this 100 years ago, but now the rocks are crying out, and they're telling us what we should have already known. Please give us the faith to implement these very simple things, because a time is coming when this is the only way that we are going to be able to affect change physically, but also more important, the only way that we are going to be able to minister to your sheep. In Jesus' name, amen. So you'll have to get the